Hi, you're listening to the NewSpace India podcast, a bi weekly talk show that exclusively brings insights from the Indian space activities ecosystem. I'm your host, Narayan, the co founder of India's first space focused think tank, Spaceport Sarabhai. Guests on the NewSpace India podcast help you understand space activities related macro and micro trends within India in all aspects, including space history, local industry, space science, technology evolution, law and policy, art, and more. The NewSpace India podcast is supported by Dassault Systems, a global leader in providing businesses and people with collaborative virtual environments to enable sustainable innovations. Dassault Systems Solutions supports startups, small and medium-scale enterprises, and original equipment manufacturers in developing disruptive solutions for space launchers and satellites. Hi, and welcome to yet another episode of the NewSpace India podcast. Today, we have here with us Gunjan, who leads Tatia Earth. Gunjan, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking the time for speaking with me.
My pleasure, Narayan. I'm really glad to be here and speaking with you, and looking to learn from you, from your experience also.
Absolutely. I mean, you're very kind in saying that, but I'm here to learn from you. I looked at, what you guys did at Tathya a few months ago, I guess, and it was very interesting because I always try to look at what kind of innovation is happening in India and what kind of teams are building what kind of products. And you struck me with the kind of work that you were doing, which was very, very interesting. And I thought I should connect with you guys, and I reached out because of that. Your perspective, I know that you guys come from a non-space background. I have stepped into the satellite industry here now. So would love to hear from you, how you guys came together with respect to coming from different backgrounds in mechanical engineering and, computer science and others, and having done work in the IT industry extensively and now stepping into the space industry. And what's the story behind Tathya coming together as a team?
As you rightly pointed out, none of us are from the traditional space industry. Part of us, all three of us, were working in the consumer internet space. Our primary experience or work revolved around data science, analytics, software development, and product management. One of us is a consultant, strategy consultant. So he used to do a lot of business development work and digital transformation work for large scale enterprise clients. Now, if you try to go back to the story of how Tathya started, then we'll have to go back to the last organization that I was working in. So it was a financial research company, online financial research company, where we were dealing with a lot of economic data, financial data, etc. And also to monetize, our primary model was to target our users, online users, with the right kind of products, or right kind of ads, or the right kind of products. So to do that, basically, we had to build a 360-degree view of our users. And one of the variables that we were trying to build in at that time, say a proxy for per capita income or proxy for income level of the user. So we tried to do that using IP address that they were coming in from. And we could map the IP address to a pin code. And we thought generally from pin code, it should be able to gauge some semblance of what's the prosperity level or income level of a user could be. So when we stepped into that domain of understanding economic status of a user based on location, that is when I came across research papers where researchers at Harvard were working on to derive poverty level in countries like Africa or sub-Saharan areas where data is very poor, to understand based on images can we determine poverty levels or income levels. That's when I got exposed to, wow, I mean, if we can determine such information by just looking at images, what other problems can we solve for? So that's when the entire research work around what kind of data is available. And I think it started around 2 years back. And that was the time I think the satellite industry was also moving towards low cost launches, a higher number of images being available. So we saw the entire industry, the entire ecosystem coming forward or coming together. And there was a possibility that say every square kilometer of the earth was getting imaged almost every day. And so I also have a background in strategy consulting. I started my career at Accenture Strategy, have experience of solving problems for clients. So that's when we thought, about what other problems can we solve for using these data sets or using these images. And at Money Control, we had another problem statement. Most of the economic data that we used to get, we used to come with a lot of lag. The data would be of poor quality. Some economies' data was not reliable. So we thought, why not can we track economic activities using those images? We started now economic activities. It's a very big problem statement to solve for. Then let's start. So we said, let's start with one domain, one small domain. Let's start with, say, talk of economic activities in the physical space. Say we have three pillars of the economy: agriculture, energy sector, and the metals and mining sector. We believed metals and mining sector was poised to grow based on how the world was moving away from fossil fuels. There'll be more need for batteries, there'll be more need for solar panels, there'll be more need for metals too. So that we thought metals and mining would be the growing sector. So we started our journey with the metals and mining sector. And now using satellite data, we can map the entire supply chain of the metals and mining sector. We started with ferrous supply chains, steel, where we can tell you based on images how much production is happening at any steel mill around the world, at any smelter around the world, for how much mining is happening, or how much inventory of different goods or different minerals are kept at different locations around the world. So this is how the genesis of the idea came across. And we are four co-founders basically. Myself and Nikit started this off. Both of us were colleagues at my previous organization. Then I had worked with Naresh, who is the CTO of the company, and I have worked with him in my earlier organization for a very long time. And Himanshu is the fourth co-founder. He is a school friend, and I've worked with him for many years across multiple projects, collaborated on multiple projects. So that's how the team got together. And now it's a journey being around more than 2 years now, actually.
Thank you for that very interesting story of how you guys came together. It's, of course, I guess, a learning curve when you start off into a new field, coming from what you were doing with consumer data and so on, to then looking at satellite imagery and so on. So when you started discovering that you could start using satellite imagery for a lot of these economic indicators and so on, was it very obvious that you have to use satellite data, or you thought about using drone data or other such sources to get insight into those regions that you were looking at? Or was it very obvious that satellites were the way to go, and if you had a sense of where you would get it, how you would get it, if you had to pay for it, and what was the discovery in that sense?
Yeah, you're right. So none of us had experience working with satellite images. So we had not seen any satellite image. The only exposure we had to satellite images was Google Maps prior to working on this problem statement. So the initial stages were like the trade-off between, I think, drones and satellite images was very clear to us, or very straightforward. Drones do not lend themselves to the type of coverage that we want, the frequent coverage and the extensive coverage that we want. So drones was not at all at the picture in the initial stages. So it was either using satellite images or other alternative data sources. So our entire thesis was, in the beginning, was predict economic activity using alternative data sources, and satellite data was part of that alternative data sources. So we started off with alternative data source with satellite images, and we believe later on we'll keep adding on more data sets, say mobile signals, if any IoT data signals come into the picture. So all these data sets will keep adding. Because I had read those papers, I believe if we can say there was a lot of work that or papers written on using satellite images to understand agri economy. So I thought some of the physics around this could also be implemented to the high heat emitting sectors. They should work on the same principles, basically. We tried a couple of use cases, examples, how are we getting good signals or not. And it's luckily at the first go itself, we got very good results for steel mills. Yeah, that's how, since we started getting acceptable results at the first go itself, then we had strong belief if we further enhance those algorithms, we should be able to get very good accuracy. So we started trying different areas, different plants or different mills at different geographies, and all of them gave us good results. So that's how it all started. Then it was clear satellite images would be the way to go. Then the second problem was what type of satellite data, from whom to buy, what data to rely on. So the economics was difficult to arrive at the beginning. Now, say for our first product, which is measuring production, we started our journey with Landsat 8. Now Landsat 8 has repeat coverage of 15 days. So we tried out our initial products with Landsat 8, but obviously Landsat 8 would not suffice for a commercial grade product which can be used by end customers, and add to it problems of cloud cover, monsoon. So there'll be huge data gaps in between. Then we started combining Landsat 8 and Modis. Started fusing Landsat 8 and Modis. So we did some image processing around that. We could actually upgrade Modis. We could predict Landsat 8 type images from. So we started getting data more frequently. Then even though fusion is a good approach, but it depends a lot on what are the pairs of data sets that we have taken to predict the end output. So with Landsat 8 and Modis, there'll be huge gaps between the prediction date and the pairs that we take of images. We thought, okay, Landsat 8 is there any other option? Then we will, and thermal data at that time was not commercially available with anyone. Landsat 8 was the only one, I think, which was giving good quality thermal data. Then we started exploring Sentinel-2 shortwave infrared, and we figured out a way using Sentinel-2 swirl bands to basically identify thermal information from any particular area. And then we started switching to Sentinel-2 and Sentinel-3. And since Sentinel-2 has a cadence of 5 days, it worked well with our environment. There also we started exploring some of the commercial images. Like Worldview 3 has a SOAR band. I think that's the only commercial SOAR band, I think, which is available right now. But I think the cost was very high at that point of time. Even now the cost is very high, so which would not be feasible for us to really expand and scale without anchor client. So we stuck to Sentinel-2 and 3, and it worked for us. On the other products, we started off with Sentinel-2. Then we started exploring other commercial images also. So it's a mix of both publicly available images and commercial images that we rely on right now. But in the meantime, while we were doing this, I think it's crazy, but I think our USP now became we could work on low and medium resolution image and do not need to entirely depend on commercial images, and which allows us to provide our insights at much lower cost than what is available in the industry, right?
Interesting. Again, very insightful as to how a team can build up coming from a completely non-space sector to building a product in the space sector with relevance. From what you said, there are a couple of things that I would love to hear from you as a kind of a prescription as to how this product evolved. Now, when you look at satellite data and you're deriving economic indicators, you want to make sure that it's not like junk in, junk out kind of a scenario with respect to data, and that people can actually rely on these insights that you are generating and that they are accurate, right? So one of the things that you actually mentioned is that they were accurate when you looked at the insights from there. So how do you actually look at accuracy from a picture of knowing that whatever indicators that you are generating is what is reflecting in the ground or on the ground? So it's the whole idea of ground truthing, that whatever is being learned from insights from these machine learning algorithms or computer vision technologies and so on, that they are, in fact, people can go out in agricultural farms, for example, that they can look at a farm and then they can look at doing a small crop cutting experiment or something like that to know what is the yield of a particular farm and the quality of the images. So, but in your case, it's something very different in here.
In our case, obviously, say for a thermal product where we measure thermal signals to measure in platform. At the onset, instead of the entire platform, we first try to build a filter around what type of images can be consumed by the model. So we put filters around cloud percentages, what percentage of the pixels are covered by cloud. And there also, it's a big scene, say 100 kilometers, 100 square kilometers scene. We don't look at the entire 100 square kilometer stretch. We just look at our AOI areas and see what are the areas, what are the pixels, or what percentage of my AOI is covered by cloud. So that those are the basic filters that we put in when using our data. Now, as we had monitored, say, hundreds of assets already, and for those assets, we have also from the ground created a lot of ground truth information from our partners. So we know the actual productions, both reported and actually. So there are numbers which are reported by the agencies, by the companies, and the actual numbers could have some deviance from them, which some of our partners know about. We relied on them at the initial stages to fine tune our algorithms or to build our algorithms. And now that we know for unit, for each asset, we know at what range those numbers would lie. All right. So when we produce a new data series, it goes through rigorous checks. Okay, what percentage of deviation that we see in that new data series from the previous, say, 4-5 months or last year's at this point of time. So all those checks that we put in while taking out any new data series and giving out to our clients. On the inventory side, where we do object detection, it's pretty clear because we can also look at the manually. On top of the checks that I already mentioned, we also look at the images manually to see whether the predicted masks, whether the predicted results are in line what we can visually see also. If we see a larger variation in our given output. It's a mix of some proprietary data sets that we have been able to gather and some manual interventions in terms of looking at the end output, looking at the images that we ensure that whatever data it goes out to our clients is top quality, is high on accuracy.
From a perspective of an end user that is looking at all of these things, can you give a perspective on what were they doing before, for example, with respect to their business processes and how much value you are creating for them, in their own markets and the kind of efficiencies that they are deriving based on the services that you guys are providing?
True. Most of the companies, right, they rely on reports, data generated by the traditional market research companies. It could be your regional players like myself, which are very big companies actually in China, who provide a lot of market data. It could be companies like Bloomberg, etc., or S&P, IHS, who provides reports, and companies rely on those information. Most of the end users are already exposed to a lot of data sets which are coming in, and using which they have a set processes which run. Now our job is to provide our first task as a new player in the market was to say our data is accurate, and we give our data at a much higher frequency. Most of the data sets that come out either come out say 15-20 days after a month is over or after a quarter is over, while we provide data sets either weekly or daily. So it's a leading indicator of what is going to happen. Second, we provide data irrespective of location. Now, other market research companies, somebody is strong in a particular geography, and so it's all fragmented. But we provide information irrespective of which location you are interested in. So and there are interesting use cases. So, for example, in Southeast Asia, countries like Vietnam, which is growing very fast in terms of industrial activities. Now, a lot of information do not come out from that region, and that region actually is starting to move the market, commodity market. So our data is being relied upon to provide insights on that region because no one else is reporting those numbers. Then third, we look at our data as more objective and scientifically derived than other players who rely on ground sources or connects, you might say, to provide those information. And the basic way in which you derive data from ground sources also lends itself to various errors. So these are the three USPs that we provide to our clients. Now there has been some early adopters. Obviously, there is pushback. There is a momentum. They have to make changes in their internal processes to adopt a new kind of information, a faster kind of information, which will require change. So we have been working with some of the early adopters who have been using our data for various use cases, from understanding, say, how much coal to sell in the Asian region, what would be the need for coal in different areas of the Asian region. They can monitor or change their supply accordingly, and also derive some pricing information. What could be the basically pricing points at which they could sell. Then there's a particular client who has been using our data sets for the Southeast Asian region to basically do a lot of analysis on top of that, and they have been selling those analysis to the larger industry, which is the physical traders, miners, etc., at a cost. So they have been able to earn a lot of revenue. Now it's difficult for us at this stage to assign a particular dollar value because it's still a little early. As we go along, I think this year we should be able to know what would be the ROI for our data sets. And we are working very closely with some of the very large companies in the sector. And when we work closely with them, I think we'll be able to learn a lot from them also, how they have been using it. And some of them do not tell us how they are using it, the data. So we have to create those relationships to understand at what exactly at what touch points our data sets solve which problems for them more precisely actually this year.
And from the sources that you mentioned earlier, you mentioned Modis and Landsat and maybe even Sentinel and others, right? Did you ever try using Indian satellite imagery, or was it just too painful to get anything from India?
No, we did try. Now we no actually we have a fairly good relationship with ISRO. Now we had multiple discussions with NRSC on our algorithms also with the scientists at NRSC on the data we wanted to use and see if we could integrate data from ISRO also in our workflow. I would say right now I think the process is not as straightforward or easy as working with say some of the other commercial satellite providers. For example, we just wanted to check for 2 months what's the frequency of data that we would get. So I would say we received data for 1 week, then we didn't receive data for 3 weeks, then again we received data on the fourth week probably. And those kind of issues are there, but I think they are probably making efforts to overcome those situations. But right now, so I think there's a lot of catch up to do with regard to if compared to other commercial providers or in ESA. I think ESA does a fabulous job of providing data sets and handholding startups or handholding companies in multiple different use cases. So I think so that's the way to go, but I think that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And from perspective of customers and adoption of these kinds of economic indicators, is this something that you see starting out in India at the enterprise level, or are we still at a very, very early stage where people are not really valuing this kind of thing, or is it only segmented to agriculture or places like that, or also in other industries like the industries that you guys are working in, metals and others? Is it just too early, or is it that you have to educate the market a lot in this?
It's not just not India actually. The entire industry we had to educate, and for them, they don't care whether the data is coming from satellites or from other sources, as long as we give them accurate at a faster interval. So that is at the back end, whatever is there. I don't think that is important for them. Just they know the capability and they know what use cases that data can solve. For them, it's just a piece of data. Now, say in the metals and mining sector, particularly in the ferrous industry that we started off, the market is now the commodities market generally is driven by China because they are the largest producer consumer of most of the commodities. So naturally, it was natural for us to start off in the Singapore region which is the trading hub. So as we got more feedback, more clients in that region, now late last year we started talking to some of the Indian companies in the metals and mining industry. So there is a lot of intrigue, I would say, to see what they could do with this data. There are meetings lined up this year, this a couple of January and February, with some of the largest companies in India in the metals and mining sector, and let's see if we can partner with some of them. I do not see it could be a problem of say India versus the rest of the world. If it solves a problem, Indian companies would adopt it earlier. It's just that the market is larger outside, but Indian companies would definitely, if it solves a problem for them, they'll definitely adopt it.
Right. And one of the things that I often think about is how do we encourage other founders to follow the same journey that you have, where they discover something, or we can support, in some initiative, having a kind of a geospatial acceleration model or an incubation model in the country. There are many of these kinds of models available in Europe and US and many other places around the world. Do you have, based on your experience so far, any insights into what can be done with respect to a geospatial incubator or accelerator specifically in India?
Yes. Yeah, great point actually. So we always thought that ESA, take the example of ESA, they have done a great job, I think, to working with companies. So we always envy some of our contemporaries in the European region because it is so easy for them to get grants to work on specific problem statements or on specific areas using geospatial data. And ESA is always supporting them. ESA works with them to develop new methodologies. So if you say there are some companies like Keros who have been strong partners with ESA, and it's spread across. No, there's 2-3 companies in UK, a couple in France who are partners with ESA, and they work on multiple business cases, not on the remote sensing side. I think a similar approach is very essential in India. Either is does that, or we have another think tank or research body which works with entrepreneurs, startups to figure out different areas how this data can be applied to. And I think, and the financial support that could be provided at the initial stages, because these areas are not the market where, say, mainstream venture capitalists come in very early, and they'll like to see traction. Or because, first of all, take for our case, right, there are not enough space accelerators or space based venture capitals in India. There are a few of them. Then also look at the sector that we have taken up, metals and mining. So it's a combination of two, which is very difficult to get in India. People who will have a thesis around investing in this in an industry combining space data with metals and mining sector. So at the initial stages, I think a lot of grant work, providing small grants like 15, 20 lakhs, 30, 40 lakhs, which will encourage people to work with on multiple use cases. And also, I think there is only possible now, say, financial support second if the data is available, right? Now, would you expect people to, again, Indian ISRO to give grant to organizations or startups which work with say data on ESA or NASA, right? That isn't very prudent. So you'll possibly believe people who explore ISRO's data sets to come out with solutions. So there, I think a lot of industry support is required around providing access to data and providing some grants at the initial stages.
Right. And from your perspective, is there any room for a lot of the mature enterprises in India to look at in-house geospatial innovation in some way or the other? Because one of the things that I've seen with many of the larger enterprises around the world today is they have these geospatial labs that they have now started to build in-house. It's been a trend for the last 15 years, maybe, at the end. I've not really seen many of this occur in enterprises within India, for example, large-scale enterprises.
Yeah, definitely. I think in the earlier answers, I should have added this. I think a collaboration between ISRO, large enterprises, and startups is required. And another problem statement that at starting on this journey is finding the right anchor clients, the first set of clients who will tell them, exactly, yeah, it really solves a problem for me. So in India, of course, there are very large companies with assets. Where there are companies with large physical assets, I think geospatial data can play a very big role, and these companies can definitely add a lot of value in terms of sharing use cases and being the initial clients for startups or people working on this, geospatial data sets.
And how mature you think the whole geospatial industry is today with respect to the kind of work that you are doing, where people don't really care if it is from satellite imagery, as you said, but they really care about the value, right? But at the end, there's a lot of fascination about the technology itself, and obviously people don't care how the technology is built. They look at the value that that particular technology is developing. So are we at the very beginning of this geospatial revolution where people will discover this more and more, or you think we're in the middle of this revolution today? And what is the scope of this industry? As in, would you think that every Fortune 500 company would be using geospatial data in some way or the other? Or?
Yeah, definitely. I believe we are just at the beginning, because a lot of, I think, physical infra is still getting built. A lot of satellites are still going there. Now, let's take an example of, say, 2-3 years back. Say, at that point of time when a lot of companies started, probably it was not even possible to give a lot of insights that we can do. Data was not available. There was continuity of data is a big problem. Those, unless and otherwise, those issues are taken care of around quality, quantity, continuity of data, it will be very difficult for businesses to adopt those insights. There will be very few businesses which will adopt those insights. Now, as we mature towards an ecosystem where the problem of data is being taken care of as we see more launches, more satellites going there, and the type of data being taken care of. So it's not just we don't need only optical images or more optical data. We need a mix of optical, thermal, radar, SAR data sets, hyperspectral, different kinds of data sets which go together into an engine to solve a problem. Now, it's an insight. I think from my experience, it's just not possible to work with one type of data sets to solve a customer pain point. We have to mix in different kinds of data sets from multiple providers to solve any particular pain point to maintain that quality and continuity of information that we give out. So when that happens, I strongly believe every big company would be able to derive very useful information based on space data. When it really becomes feasible to look at every point of the earth every day at a cost which makes sense for a business to invest, that probably would be a tipping point when I think every big company or every company should be able to make their businesses more efficient using geospatial information. If we think of our platform that we are building is towards making that possible, because no, let's say how we are building our platform is any user can select any. Right now it's restricted to the metal and mining sector. No, you just upload the location of any asset and you should be able to get every important information regarding that asset. If you upload a location of a steel mill, you should be able to get production, inventory, emissions data for a steel mill very instantaneously. So that we believe should be the future as we move on.
Right. And one of the other, again, very interesting pointers that I would love to have you talk about is, when I look at the human resource base in India, we have an extremely large pool of very talented engineers who are building all sorts of things when it respect to information technology, right? But there's very few of them who have discovered that they can apply some of those principles and jump into the whole satellite industry like you have, for example, right? So from that perspective, do you think that this industry is still at the edge and people are not really discovering this? The whole, one of the things that I always wonder is why aren't more and more people who are in Infosys or TCS or, Wipro or wherever, who have 15, 20 years of experience and understand everything from cloud architectures to enterprise software and everything else and know how that particular industry works in other sectors, are not jumping into this sector saying that I know something that I can build on top of this and provide some enterprise value to all of these guys. I haven't really seen that happen yet in India to a large extent. So why do you think this exists? And do you see, of course, an opportunity in all of that?
Of course, there's an opportunity. I think the primary reason is awareness. I didn't know about it until I bumped into a problem statement which required me to look at satellite images. So I think it's just awareness for now. Even now, when I talk to people, when I talk to my friends, or when I say satellite images, they think it must be very, very difficult to do. How do you get satellite images? Where's the fascination? Fascinated satellite image. For us, it's just an image that comes in. That's the barrier to entry because people think it's still set in India. People still think satellite space is something only the governments can do. And now, if people are not aware of the data, they won't be able to imagine the business cases that can be solved using this new type of information that is very widely available right now. Now, another reason could be in India, some people in the IT sector, right? What are the kind of problems that they are exposed to? For example, metals and mining industry. I don't think 80% of the people in the IT sector would be exposed to the metals and mining industry or to the crude industry or to the agri industry. Definitely, because I think India is a predominantly agri economy and in their background, parents, grandparents, somebody would be in the agri sector. So they understand the agri sector, but people do not understand the crude sector, the metals and mining sector or the shipping economy. No, I was not exposed to this economy. And when I think now, say the marine industry, which is $1 trillion industry, move goods, our economies cannot exist without them. And in our education or our upbringing, we were never exposed to those industries. And I think those industries are still now predominantly European, I would say. So yeah, so it's all these reasons combined. I would say we have still not been able to have more companies work on more use cases regarding using geospatial data.
And what are the challenges like for you guys now? Is it, hiring? Is it, something else at the moment? I always wonder if hiring is a big problem in India because, at the end of the day, one of the things that I see is a large pool of people who want to get into the industry but may not have the relevant skills, for example.
Yeah, yeah. Hiring for us, fortunately, it had not been a big problem because we have tapped into some of the specialized institutes like IIT Bombay for hiring specifically for remote sensing roles, and it has worked out very well for us. Now, it's not difficult for any say software developer or a data scientist to move into a remote sensing role because the basic principles remain the same. Say a camera image versus a satellite images, there are certain differences, but at the same time, it's all physics that they are exposed to. So I don't think that should be a problem. So I think for us, it has the biggest problem has been reaching out to new clients because we are based in India and most of our clients are abroad. It's easier for existing clients. It's easier to maintain the relationships and more services. But I think what's been tougher is to convert new clients when we are all remote. And in an industry like this, where everything is new for the end client customer also. So I think that has been a big disadvantage because none of us had been able to travel to meet clients. Either they are in the lockdown or we are in lockdown. No, it's just not worked out where we could say go to Singapore, stay there for 2 months, meet everyone, understand the problem statements at once, and come back and deliver that. So that's not been able to. We have not been able to do that yet. Hopefully, in the near future, this year we should be traveling a lot more to meet our new customers. So that is problem statement number one. I think the second has been, I would not say a big problem, but I think the ecosystem around venture funding is also getting built in India. So we have been able to raise some funds earlier. Not many venture capitals will have a thesis around our industry. Yeah, so we have a limited pool to work with when we come to space applications, because now space applications will combine both space data plus the industry where we are solving those problems. So it gets even more remote, or the pie gets even more smaller in that case.
Yeah, I mean, again, super interesting, all the insights that you are sharing from your experiences so far. And I guess, you guys based in Mumbai has some advantage to where you are because a lot of the economic indicators and the financial industry around the indicators are all around you guys, maybe exploited in one way or the other. Have you got a sense of how deeply are financial markets in India using any of these kinds of satellite-based indicators or space-based indicators? Or is it that I know that, for example, UBS and many other bankers and so on, so they use a lot of this kind of indicators to make a lot of decisions. I'm not really seen that a lot in India yet. I know that Kava Space and maybe a couple of others are working on this front, for example. Is it just too early, or are the trades too small for people to pay for this kind of information?
It's both, I would say. Now, India is primarily a equity market, I believe, where people invest in equities. While when our data sets can be primarily used for either macro investing, because of metals mining, if you combine everything together, you'll get a good picture of the macro economy, or into commodity trading. The financial industry for commodity trading is not evolved in India. In the financial market for commodities sector, it's either London or North America or Singapore. So those are the primary markets for commodity trading. So the market itself around in the financial industry for trading on commodities is limited in India. Now, I think around agri sector also, as you mentioned, the company is doing it. I don't think in India the financial sector for agri commodity trading is very deep compared to North America. It's just not the space data, it's the markets themselves which are limited in India, which limits the usage of sophisticated technologies. Because if you use this data, you also have to generate that alpha or that ROI from this information, which at this stage is probably not sustainable in the markets that Indian financial industry works in. But however, if somebody gives information around the automobile market, auto sectors, I think those kind of informations can be adopted in India. How much cars are being manufactured each month at different manufacturing units. I think those are the information that can be used by the Indian financial industry. Yeah. So those are the reasons I think the adoption in India has been in the financial industry.
And one of the emerging topics around the world is this ESG, the environmental, social and governance perspectives for a lot of the sustainability of resources and climate change and others. And from your experiences so far in developing products for this metals and mining industry, how deep has this concept of ESG gotten into the enterprises in the metals and mining space? And are there anything beyond the economic indicators that they are trying to evolve to, fit that into this climate change or ESG framework?
Yeah, definitely. I think the metals and mining industry, so I give example of some of the resource companies, mining companies. So they very thoroughly track their entire supply chain. It's just not scope 1 emissions. They monitor scope 2, scope 3 also. So if somebody is mining iron ore, they'll also monitor which ships are carrying those goods or commodities, and what's the efficiency level of the say steel mills which are using those raw materials. The entire metal mining industry is, I would say, is very aware of the ESG space, and efforts are being made to improve the ESG scores. And I think here satellite data would play a very key role for them. So there are conversations happening around, can satellite data help them track asset level emissions? So right now we understand Tropomi, OCO, or GoSat, we can provide emissions, but at a very large area scale. But the underlying problem statement is, can small areas or small assets can also be tracked now? So we are working on certain interesting products on that. In fact, we have observed using thermal imagery, we have been able to correlate or closely match the declared carbon dioxide equivalent numbers from many steel mills in certain geographies. Yeah, so I think the environmental sector would be a big market for remote sensing companies, for satellite companies and remote sensing companies. I think a lot will evolve as policymakers, financial institutes, everyone get around to exactly what needs to be tracked, exactly what needs to be done. Now, right now, there's a lot of discussions going on everywhere. We hear a lot of chatter, but I think something concrete has to come out. What exactly are the metrics that need to be? The ESG metrics themselves are not, I think, standardized yet, or there's no strict regulations around how they are reported. Everyone does it, but yeah, there's no standardized way of doing it. I think around the environmental side, at least satellite data can, I think, play a very big role in understanding both environmental impacts of companies or assets, as well as understanding how much at risk are those industries, units, assets are to climate changes. So we are looking at both these angles very closely right now, actually.
And I would love for you to confirm something that I have as a theory in my mind, which is that I feel like India is going to be a great place for this kind of geospatial companies to come out in the next few years, especially because of the talent pool and all the IT infrastructure that we have, and a lot of the access that we have, alongside the cost of infrastructure decreasing, and the talent pool, of course, is much less expensive compared to US and other places. So I also feel like the cultural understanding of problems may be much easier for people in India to do and solve it at certain price points that many other people may not be able to replicate in places like US or Europe, for example. Right. So I feel like, a lot of the solutions that will probably get built in India will be able to easily scale outside in places like Africa or Southeast Asia or otherwise as well. And so on. So what are your thoughts around all of this?
I agree with your thoughts actually on this. Building from India gives us a huge advantage in terms of cost, definitely. And now if we can build from India at a price point which is not just competitive with, but much lower to other European nations. So who are we competing here? It is either European or North American companies. And I think the economies there are very different. The price points are much higher. For the same product, we can sell at, say, fifth of the cost, just because our economies work well from here. So it's much easier for us to scale. Then whatever we built for India, as you rightly pointed out, we can scale to South Asian nations, to African nations who probably have the same kind of problem statements to what we have. When we first started out with the problem statement of understanding, say, per capita income in India. So in US, you don't need that service because you already have IXI assets and all, where they track pin code level, asset level. It is comparable to our Asian economy, Southeast Asian economy, South Asian economy, African economy, where we still rely on manual surveys done every year, every 5 years or every 10 years, where crores and crores of money is spent to do this service, which I think can be done much more efficiently, much more at much higher frequency using satellite images or using other alternative data sources, and it will fit with all the other economies that you just mentioned. I think, it can work very well building from India.
Right. So thank you so much again for taking the time. It's been really fascinating to hear all the things that you're sharing. Maybe one last final question before I let you go. Where do you see yourself and the team at Tathya in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years' time?
So let me speak about 5 years only, because 10 years is too long a time horizon, I think, to predict. So in 5 years, we should be able to map all key assets across the world in the metals and mining industry, and will probably be in another ancillary industry other than after having solved for the metals and mining industry. And we should have products around climate risk and on sustainability. These are three products that I am bullish on for the next 5 years. And regarding the team, I think India would always be the development center, but I think it is essential for us to have a European presence and a North American presence also, along with a presence in Singapore. Yes, so multiple countries, metals and mining industry solve for checking of supply chains and our product on sustainability and climate risk. So yeah, that's what we intend to solve in the next 5 years.
Right. Thank you very much, Gunjan. I think this has been very educative for me, and then I'm sure that the audience will also love hearing this particular conversation as well. So thank you again for taking so much time, and good luck to the entire team at Tatia. And I'm always going to be a keen observer and learning from your developments and products.
Thank you so much, Narayan, and thank you for giving the opportunity to share my thoughts. And yeah, I'll keep in touch, and we'll discuss, I think, how things are shaping up at our end frequently.
Thank you for listening in to this episode of the NewSpace India podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share this episode with anyone you believe will enjoy listening to it. You'll be able to find the NewSpace India podcast in any of the podcasting platforms that you may be using, including Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and others. Do subscribe to the podcast in case you want to receive new episodes automatically. I'm grateful if you're able to leave a rating for the podcast, which will help others discover it. Thank you for listening in again, and the next episode will be out in the next 2 weeks as usual.